Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Budale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Tinamine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschachana Vishatarane. So, great honor to be here in this very nicely arranged Helsinki temple here with, nice young and elder devotees here. My name is Yogendra Das. I'm a disciple of Srila Prabhupada. I was initiated in the Stockholm Temple in 1976 for the first time, and then in Prabhupada's last big initiation in Mayapur. I was one of the 300 who got initiation second time, 200 first and 100 second. There in the last Prabhupada's final Gorpurnim there in Mayapur. Since then, I've been here in Scandinavia, Sweden mostly. Now, in recent years, I'm up in the north. So, Janardhan has brought me here. So, we're reading today from the Caitanya-Caritamrita Adi-lila, chapter 1, text number 49. Jaya Jaya Mahaprabhu Shri Krishna Chaitanya.
Jaya Jaya Mahaprabhu Shri Krishna Chaitanya.
Tanhara Charana Shrita Se Bhadatanya. Tanhara Charana Shrita Se Bhadatanya. Okay. Now this is a verse that everybody knows. It's from the Bhagavad Gita. It's in here in the CC, but it's quoted here from the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 10, verse number 10. Tesham, please repeat. Tesham satata yuktanam.
Tesham satata yuktanam.
Bhajatam priti purvakam.
Bhajatam priti purvakam.
Dadami buddhi yogam tam.
Dadami yogi yogam tam.
Yenamam vayanti te.
Yenamam vayanti te.
Jai.
Tesham satata yuktanam.
Tesham satata yuktanam.
Bhajatam priti purvakam.
Bhajatam priti purvakam.
Dadami buddhi yogam tam.
Dadami buddhi yogam tam.
Yenamam upayanti te.
Yenamam upayanti te.
Anybody else?
Tesham satata yuktanam.
Tesham satata yuktanam.
Bhajatam priti purvakam.
Bhajatam priti purvakam.
Nadami buddhi yogam tam.
Dadami buddhi yogam tam.
Yenamam upayanti te.
Yenamam upayanti te.
Tesham satata yuktanam.
Tesham satata yuktanam.
Bhajatam priti purvakam.
Bhajatam priti purvakam.
Dadami buddhi yogam tam.
Dadami buddhi yogam tam.
Yenamam upayanti te.
Yenamam upayanti te. Nice melody. Anybody else?
Tesham satata yuktanam.
Tesham satata yuktanam.
Bhajatam priti purvakam.
Bhajatam priti purvakam.
Dadami buddhi yogam tam.
Dadami buddhi yogam tam.
Yenamam upayanti te.
Yenamam upayanti te. All together. Tesham satata yuktanam. Bhajatam priti purvakam. Dadami buddhi yogam tam. Yenamam upayanti te. One more, last time. Tesham satata yuktanam. Bhajatam priti purvakam. Dadami buddhi yogam tam. Yenamam upayanti te. So word for word here, please repeat. Tesham,
Tesham,
unto them.
unto them.
Satata yuktanam,
Satata yuktanam.
always engaged,
always engaged,
Bhajatam,
Bhajatam,
in devotional service,
in devotional service,
Priti Purvakam,
Priti Purvakam,
in loving ecstasy,
in loving ecstasy,
Dadami,
Dadami,
I give,
I give,
Buddhi Yogam,
Buddhi Yogam,
real intelligence,
real intelligence,
Tam, that, Yena,
Yena,
by which,
by which,
Mam,
unto
unto me,
me,
Upayanti,
Upayanti,
come,
come,
te,
here,
they.
here.
Translation of purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. To those who are constantly devoted and worship me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. To those who are constantly devoted and worship me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. Finish, somebody can read or recite by heart.
Heille, jotka ovat alati omistautuneet minun palvelukseen ja palvovat minua palvovat minua rakastavasti, heille minä annan ymmärryksellä ja voivat saattaa minua.
Anybody else? Can you say it? The whole thing?
Oh, I have to do it.
Okay. Yeah. This is an opulence Prabhupada would be proud of. You know, having the Finnish language here, all his books translated. One of the Chatu Shloki verses, or the 4 key verses in the heart of the Gita, at the heart of the Mahabharata, at the heart of the Vedas, the 5th Veda. Okay?
Niille, jotka ovat aina omistautuneet palvelemaan minua rakastavasti, minä annan ymmärryksen, jolla he voivat tulla minun luokse.
I think I recognize the word umara, right? Does that mean understand?
Yes.
Umara?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the only Finnish word I know. Okay, so one who is devoted to me, he understands intelligence. Is that the... Okay, so the purport now, Srila Prabhupada. This verse of Bhagavad Gita 10:10 clearly states how Govindadeva instructs his bona fide devotee. The Lord declares that by enlightenment in theistic knowledge, he awards attachment for him to those who constantly engage in his transcendental loving service. This awakening of divine consciousness enthralls the devotee, who thus wishes his eternal transcendental mellow, who thus relishes his eternal transcendental mellow. Such an awakening is awarded only to those convinced by devotional service about the transcendental nature of the personality of Godhead. They know that the supreme truth, the all-spiritual and all-powerful person, is one without a second and has fully transcendental senses. Yeah, the all-spiritual and all-powerful person is one without a second and has fully transcendental senses. He is the fountainhead of all emanations. Such pure devotees always merged in knowledge of Krishna and absorbed in Krishna consciousness, engaged thoughts and realizations as great scientists, engage their views and discuss the results of their research in scientific academies. Such exchanges of thought in regard to Krishna give pleasure to the Lord, who therefore favors such devotees with all enlightenment. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam Jainamam upayantite. To those who are constantly devoted and worship me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. One more time, this to finish.
He, jotka ovat alati omistautuneet minun palvelukseeni. Ja heille minä annan ymmärryksiä, joilla he voivat saavuttaa tulla luokse.
Nice. Om Caitanya-Caritamrita Adi-lila Shalakaya Chakshur Tasma Shri Gurve Namaha. Vajikalpatarvishta So the first line, Prabhupada, he refers to Govinda Deva, and that was mentioned in the previous purport here about the three Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana deities were mentioned in the previous verse, which, the previous verse, sorry. Govinda Dev is the deity of Sambandha Prayojana. Sambandha Abhideya. So Sambandha, that means establishing one's relationship with the Lord. And the deity there is Madan Mohan. And then the next step is the Abhideya. That is the process by which, when the relationship is established, the process for cultivating the relationship is the Abhideya step. And there the deity is Govinda Dev, who Prabhupada refers to here, leading to some prayojana, the ultimate fruit of attaining the goal of love of full-bloomed love of Godhead. And there the deity is Gokarnath. So in this purport, Prabhupada says that clearly states how Govinda instructs his bona fide devotees. Yeah. So how they can come to me, that's the cultivation of the relationship, which is established on the basis, as Prabhupada puts here in the purport, of realization that God is a person who has full transcendental senses. But he's not an ordinary person, he's the all-powerful person. Right? We also have power. We're, fragmental. We have the power to take the train from Tornio to that's our power, but Krishna has the power to maintain so many universes with so many railroad tracks and countless living entities going here and there. That's the difference between the all-powerful and the individual, minute powerful. He's the fountainhead of all emanations. And there's a hint here of the next verse in the Chatur Shloka, which is, what is that? After 10:10, 10:11, how does it start? Machita, Madgita, Prana, Bodhayantas, Parasparam, Katayantas, Chamam Nicham, Tushanti Charamanti Chaya. That the devotees there are always engaged in discussing about Krishna consciousness, just like we're gathered here this morning, Saturday morning here, and we're experiencing some, taste here, we're feeling some enjoyment of Krishna consciousness by hearing and speaking about Krishna. So, and Prabhupada compares it to scientific academies, where the scientists will, make a paper and present their latest discoveries with their controlled experiments in the laboratory, and they've dismissed some hypothesis and they've established that this one is not yet, what's it called, falsified, Ravinda Sarup jokes that, they say, previously we thought, but now we know, blah, blah, blah. And then in a few years, it'll be, that which we knew, that's also was previously what they thought, and now they've come up with something else that they know. So he jokes, Ravinda Prabhu, he jokes that what they actually should say is that previously we knew, but now we think, blah, blah, blah. But here, this, the devotional, the conclusions of the Veda are Siddhanta. They're actually Aparushaya. They're delivered by not an ordinary person who has the 4 defects. What are these 4 defects? Does anybody know any one of these 4? Yeah.
Imperfect senses.
Sorry.
Imperfect senses.
Imperfect senses, yeah. An example?
Like we try to see the stars, how much we can see.
Yeah.
With the eyes.
Right. It looks like a little dot there, about the size of a period on the page here. But we
Or
know
the sun, the same.
Sorry?
When we look on the sun, the
Yeah.
same way, Prabhupada give an example, we think that it's like a disc.
Yeah. Yeah, like about the size of a euro or something. We know that it's, I think Prabhupada said millions of times bigger than the Earth, or 93,000 times. The sun is incredibly bigger than the Earth. Okay, that's make mistakes. Or no, that's, make mistakes. Another, that's one.
It's a perfect senses.
Imperfect sense.
And then you give
Okay, yeah,
you
imperfect
already
senses.
give an answer for us.
Okay. Yeah, imperfect senses. Yeah, we make mistakes and we have imperfect senses, who can say what Kalpapadapa is doing there? Our senses are limited, we can't even see beyond this wall, what to speak of what's happening in India or somewhere. Our senses are imperfect and limited. That's 2. Then 3.
Telling lies.
Yeah. Propensity to cheat, that's also there, yeah. We, like a teacher will teach, but doesn't really know what he's talking about. The only solution for that is actually to hear and Shravanam Kirtanam. If one actually listens to Krishna, the source of all knowledge, perfect knowledge, and then tries to the best of one's ability to repeat honestly, according to one's own ability to repeat, then that is kirtanam, that we can evade by the grace of the spiritual master and Krishna that cheating propensity. Okay, so we have imperfect senses, makes mistakes, cheating, and
We have tendency to become illusion,
illusion. An example?
to identify ourselves with this problem.
Right, that's a classic example that any Prabhupada follower would immediately think of, I think. That Prabhupada and Krishna, drives home at the very beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, the first lesson to Arjuna that we're not this body, but we have the full propensity in conditioned life to identify with your nation, your race, your gender, and your religious affiliation, and so on and so forth, your family, and so many things. So this scientific engagement can be perfected if one would try to find out. And science means to find out knowledge. And so if that propensity, even if it were in a controlled experiment in a laboratory, I guess, if that could be directed towards discovering that Krishna is a Supreme Personality of Godhead, and that would be free from these defects, I think, in the best, in ideal case at least. So, yeah, that's this verse from the CC. Now, in order to illustrate this, I have a plan here that I would like to lift up a section of the Bhagavatam here, which it's from the 4th canto. Gopal Krishna, could you give these to different devotees, one of these each? This is from a detailed overview of Bhagavatam, cantos 1 to 4 by Borijan Das, a Prabhupada disciple. And here in the end of the 4th canto, page 930, in the 4th canto, there's a description which illustrates this principle of being fully devoted to Krishna in love, and then getting understanding, which Krishna gives from within the heart. That Dudami Buddhi Yogantam. Buddhi means, they translated as intelligence, but it doesn't mean like IQ intelligence or something that they measure by the college boards. In America, I'm sure it's the same here. That to get into college, the high school candidates, they have to take a special test. But that's not the kind of intelligence which is being referred to here. But the buddhi, it's actually, in English you could call it mindsets. It's like a world view. And there's a word that was introduced in science called paradigm. It's like an entire vision of what is reality. That's buddhi. That's like comprehensive. Like somebody will find no pleasure whatsoever in coming to the Bhagavatam class on Saturday morning in Helsinki, because their buddhi is in another, is in passion or maybe worst case ignorance. But we fortunately, by good association and blessing of spiritual mastery and Guru Thai, we have a little goodness here, and we have this buddhi to come to Bhagavatam class here in the Hare Krishna temple. So this is illustrated here in this story of, it's an allegory. Normally, Prabhupada would emphasize that these Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam especially, it's not mythology. It's factual histories. But there is the allegory. It's a story made up by Narada Muni to a king called Prachanabarhi Shat. He was a descendant of Dhruva and was very, therefore, the relatives of a devotee are especially protected by Krishna, even if they're non-devotees. So Narada, he was distressed. Shishi Golotai Ki Jai. So Narada was distressed at seeing that this, how long does this class go on? What time do you usually end?
Yeah, it's like
8:30? 8:30, okay.
Yeah.
Including questions.
If you want, you can go further.
We'll keep to the regular schedule. I'll try as far as possible here. But yeah, I was just saying that so Narada Muni, he approached this king who was absorbed in making some jagyas. And the Vedic jagyas, it entailed animal slaughter. Not slaughter, that means, factories where the people produce hamburgers. That's not what I'm talking about. It was, there was a ritual when an animal was sacrificed in the Vedic, the old Vedic, classic Vedic karma kanda. So anyway, Narada was, distressed and he wanted to enlighten this king. So he came and he told this allegory about Puranjan. Puranjan is a represent, it's an allegorical figure which represents the conditioned soul who identifies with the Puranjan, with the city of the body. And it covers several chapters here at the end of the fourth canto. So let's go ahead now to page 930. Everybody has a copy?
Yeah.
So we're looking at Canto 4, Chapter 28, verse 47 to 48. So let me read the shloka here. Text number 47 here. It goes like this. Just 1 second. Atmanam shochati dinam abandram viklavashrubi stanav ashicha vine shushvaram prarudasa prarurodasa. So translation. Being alone now and a widow in the forest, the daughter of Vidarbha began to lament, incessantly shedding tears which soaked her breasts and crying very loudly. Janardhan, you haven't finished?
Yeah. Ollessaan nyt yksin ja leskenä tuossa metsässä Vidarbhan tytär alkoi valittaa ja itkeä äänekkäästi ja vuodattaa lakkaamasta kyyneleitä, jotka kastelivat hänen rintansa kautta.
Prabhupada would be very happy, he never made it to Finland, but his books have made it. So he would be very happy. So this is the Vaidarbhi. This is the daughter of Vidarbha, the king of Vidarbha, that was the reincarnation of Puranjan, this allegorical figure Puranjan. He was, too attached to his, queens, and he was hunting in the forest, and he was killing animals, and he was then overcome by time, Kalakanya, and a whole allegory is there. And then his next birth was as this. Because he was doing sacrifices in the Vedas, he took a pious birth, the daughter of a pious king called Vaidarbhi. And then she was married to a king called Malaya Dvaja, also a pious Vedic king. So then they went, after he had given over his kingdom to his sons, and when he became old, they went to the forest and he performed austerities for a long, long time. And then he left the body and she was left alone. And now this is the story. Now 48, next verse. Utishto tishto rajarshe imam udadi mekalam dasyubhya shatra bandhubhyo bibhyatim patum arhasi. Translation, O best of kings, please get up. She's saying now to her dead husband there in the forest there. O best of kings, please get up, get up. Just see this world surrounded by water and infested with rogues and so-called kings. This world is very much afraid, and it's your duty to protect her.
Very definition.
Yeah.
Voi kuninkaista paras, pyydän sinua nousemaan. Nouse ylös, katso vain kuinka vesi ympäröi tätä maailmaa ja kuinka roistot ja niin kutsutut kuninkaat sitä kiusaavat. Tämä maailma on hyvin peloissaan ja sinun velvollisuutesi on suojata häntä.
Okay, so now Borijan, we're looking at page 930 here. So Borijan, who's making this overview in this, this book, the Unveiling the Lotus Feet, a very good resource I would highly recommend. He begins like this. In his purport to text 48, Srila Prabhupada describes the aftermath, what happens after the empowered Acharya's departure from this world. Remember now, Prabhupada is writing this just, a few years before, he was already, approaching 80 when he wrote this, and he was the leader of it. He had accomplished this incredible achievement of spreading Krishna consciousness around the world. Gopal Krishna, can you read? Whenever an Acharya comes,
Whenever an Acharya comes, following the superior orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his representative, he establishes the principles of religion as enunciated in Bhagavad Gita. Unfortunately, when the Acharya disappears, rogues and non-devotees take advantage and immediately begin to introduce unauthorized principles in the name of so-called swamis, yogis, philanthropists, welfare workers, and so on. Actually, human life is meant for executing the orders of the Supreme Lord, and this is stated in Bhagavad Gita 9:24.
Mandana Bhava Madbhakto Madhyaji Mandamaskaru Mame Vaisyasi Yuktaivam Atmanam Matparayanuha.
Engage your mind always in thinking of me and become my devotee. Offer obeisances and worship me. Be completely absorbed in me. Surely you will come to me. The main business of human society is to think of the Supreme Personality of God at all times, to become his devotees, to worship the Supreme Lord, and to bow down before him. The Acharya, the authorized representative of the Supreme Lord, establishes these principles. But when he disappears, things once again become disordered. The perfect disciples of the Acharya try to relieve the situation by sincerely following the instructions of the spiritual master. At the present moment, practically the entire world is afraid of rogues and non-devotees. Therefore, this Krishna consciousness movement is started to save the world from irreligious principles. Everyone should cooperate with this movement in order to bring about actual peace and happiness in this world.
Thank you. There was a note here now about rogues. The world's afraid of rogues and non-devotees. Now, Bori John writes, although the people of the world may not consciously fear, quote, rogues and non-devotees, unquote, the activities of such persons have nevertheless increased the fear and anxiety of the world's population, dread of disease. Here we are in the middle of this COVID plague. Well, people think that it's over now, but that remains to be seen. Okay, but dread of disease, thievery, robbers. I heard that we have to have an alarm system here in the temple, because it's Helsinki. And there's war, and now Afghanistan, God only knows what's going to happen there. The impact on the international balance of power here. Violence, I just heard, my landlord told me that there was a man harassing his ex-wife and they had to call the police. This is going on everywhere. Economic hardship. There's fires in southern Europe and there's floods in northern Europe and extreme weather being predicted and further economic, challenges, etc. Okay, so then now Narada Muni continued, shloka 49. Evam vilapanti bala vipinain ugatapatim patita padayor vartu rudat ashrun yavartayat. The most obedient wife thus fell down at the feet of her dead husband and began to cry pitifully in the solitary forest. Thus the tears rolled down from her eyes. Janardhan? 49.
Tuo mitä kuuliaisen vaimo lankesi rakkaan aviomiehensä jalkojen juureen ja alkoi itkeä säälittävästi tuossa yksinäisessä metsässä. Kyyneleet vierivät hänen silmistään.
Okay. Now text number 50. Chitim daru mayim chitva tasyam patyu kalevaram Adipya Chanumarane Vila Panti Manodade. She then prepared a blazing fire with firewood and placed the dead body of her husband upon it. When this was finished, she lamented severely and prepared herself to perish in the fire with her husband.
Sitten hän valmisti polttopuusta loimuavan rovion ja pani siihen aviomiehensä kuolleen ruumiin. Tämän tehtyään hän murehti ankarasti ja valmistautui kuolemaan tulessa yhdessä aviomiehensä kanssa.
Yeah, this is the classical, Indian sati, right? The widow will enter. This is the only thing that people know about Hinduism. They maybe know cows, karma, and the caste system, but other than that, they know nothing about except sati. The British. Actually, the British, they were not interfering with Hinduism during their colonial rule, except for one thing. The one intervention they made into the Manodharma, the Hindu law, was this: they forbade the sati rite. And maybe rightfully, there's, I think, in Bhakti True Swami's wonderful film of Prabhupada's, he presents the background where Bhakti Vinod was actually intervening and saving a widow who was being forced unwillingly to perform sati. So anyway, it's a complicated sociological thing, but it's been become like the prototype. What is Hinduism? Oh, it means sati. But it's not so black and white there. Prabhupada would say that in his lifetime, he's seen, just like 50 years ago, he said at that time, maybe it's 100 years ago now, that there was a chaste wife who he saw voluntarily entered. Anyway, so in his purports to text 49 and 50, do you know that? Or what is your name, Prabhu? Gyanadas, yeah. Can you read in his purports to text 49 and 50?
In his purports to text 49 and 50, Srila Prabhupada describes how proper disciples respond after their guru's disappearance. Just as a devoted wife becomes afflicted at the passing away of her husband, when a spiritual master passes away, the disciple becomes similarly bereaved. What is the meaning of bereaved?
Good question. If you don't know a word, please ask. Sad. Bereaved, it means you've lost something which is very, very important to you. Yeah.
And a devoted disciple of the spiritual master would rather die with the spiritual master than fail to execute the spiritual master's mission. As the Supreme Personality of Godhead comes down upon this earth to re-establish the principles of religion, so his representative, the spiritual master, also comes to re-establish religious principles. It is the duty of the disciples to take charge of the mission of the spiritual master and execute it properly. Otherwise, the disciples should decide to die along with the spiritual master. In other words, to execute the will of the spiritual master, the disciple should be prepared to lay down his life and abandon all personal considerations.
Okay, so here we have personal considerations. You should be able to execute it properly, and you should make a decision, whether you're going to be able to do that, or otherwise you should, give up. So this requires intelligence. That's the theme here, that, by being fully devoted to the spiritual master and his order, and trying to shoulder the heavy responsibility of his mission in his absence. This requires that one has intelligence, and that comes from the super soul in the heart here, just like we read. Okay, next section is text 51 to 65. We just have this one last verse here. In 61, Vaidarbi, this allegorical daughter and wife, widow now, takes instructions from Avigyata, her old, in quotation marks, her so-called old unknown friend. And there's a note here at the bottom. Narada mentioned Puranjana's friend Avigyata, the unknown one, in Bhagavatam 4:25:10, and called him Sakayam Suridam, his well-wishing friend, in Bhagavatam 4:28-25. So this is a theme, there was foreshadow, and now this old friend here. At an auspicious time or at a particular time, if a brahmana suddenly appears unannounced, that's very auspicious. I remember when at Amvik there was, at the death of my godbrother Bharat, we were there just, with his wife, Asta Siddhi, and she was naturally, and then sad and bereaved, and then suddenly Mahahari came to fetch books for Gothenburg. So, we could understand here that this was a very auspicious sign here. A brahmana comes uninvited. He had just gotten Brahman initiation. I think he was saying his Gayatri for the first time, it took him 10 minutes or something like that. So, it was like, Hare Krishna. So, as Vaidarbi prepared, what is your name again, sir?
Vilas Bihari.
Vilas Bihari. As Vaidarbi prepared,
As Vaidarbi prepared to renounce her body,
Yeah, that's it.
by giving it to her husband's funeral pyre, a brahmana, King Purajana's old friend, suddenly arrived and spoke sweetly to the queen. In his preferred to the next 41, Srila Prabhupada explains the old friend's identity.
Okay, so now we're running out of time. We just read now this first paragraph. Tima, the appearance of an old friend.
The appearance of an old friend in the form of Brahmana is very significant. In his Paramata feature, Krishna is the old friend of everyone. The Lord is always eager to have the living entity come home back to Godhead. Sitting with the living entity as witness, the Lord gives him all chance to enjoy himself materially. But whenever there is an opportunity, the Lord gives good counsel and advises the living entity to abandon trying to become happy through material adjustment, and instead turn his face toward the Supreme Personality of Godhead and surrender unto Him.
Now this is a kind of aphorism or a sutra. This line here that's underlined. Tima.
When one becomes serious to follow the mission of the spiritual master, his resolution is tantamount to seeing the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Tantamount, that means it's the same thing as, it is practically as good as, it's tantamount. It's not the same thing, but it's just about practically the same thing. When one becomes serious to follow the mission of the spiritual master, his resolution, his determination, his firm decision from the depth of his heart, with all his intelligence, with his buddhi, that resolution, it's tantamount, it's practically the same thing as seeing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is a real packed statement here. Okay, so we'll end there. Thank you very much. So remember, the verse was Teshan Satata Yuktanam Rajatam Priti Purvakam Udami Buddhi Yogam Tam Enamam Priyatite. To those who are constantly devoted to worshiping me with love, I give them the understanding. For what? By which they can come to me. That's the bhakti path. Hare Krishna. Any questions or comments? Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai.
It's nice to Prabhu Ki.
Jai.